A lot of this trauma, we got it, but never dealt with it, never put a name on it because we weren't privileged to. We weren't privileged to call our situation PTSD. We weren't privileged to learn all these different syndromes. But we done been through it from birth. Our mamas beat us because of slavery. We was taught that in slavery. People walk out the church and go to the bathroom and put that one finger up to let master know they going to the bathroom. All that was taught from slavery, bruh. Like, we still traumatized and don't know how to get any healing, or afraid of getting healing because we don't want to seem weak. That's a sign of weakness. I ain't going to sit and pay no therapist my money. What fuck? But we actually need it. We got it, but never dealt with it, never put a name on it because we weren't privileged to. We weren't privileged to call our situation PTSD. We weren't privileged to learn all these different syndromes. But we done been through it from birth. Our mamas beat us because of slavery. We was taught that in slavery. People walk out the church and go to the bathroom and put that one finger up to let master know they going to the bathroom. All that was taught from slavery, bruh. Like, we still traumatized and don't know how to get any healing, or afraid of getting healing because we don't want to seem weak. That's a sign of weakness. I ain't going to sit and pay no therapist my money. What fuck? But we actually need it. A lot of this trauma, we got it, but never dealt with it, never put a name on it because we weren't privileged to. We weren't privileged to call our situation PTSD. We weren't privileged to learn all these different syndromes. But we done been through it from birth.
Well, here's an interesting question for the brother. If we was, as he says, we dealt with it since birth. So if we've dealt with it since birth, isn't it fair to say that we have evolved in knowing what the triggers should be, and of course how to deal with the triggers of what has transpired in the past that may or may not be affecting us directly? Because when you say we, that includes us, whether we know each other or we don't know each other, because you said we. So that's where it gets a little interesting for me. And I'm not picking on the brother. I'm just looking for a little clarity and putting a little clarity on what he's saying. So we're gonna listen a little bit more to what he's saying, because there's something else that is kind of tricky for me.
Our mamas beat us because of slavery.
So our mamas beat us due to slavery. So you didn't miss much. You didn't miss much. You didn't miss much. We're just starting from the very beginning again. If our mamas beat us, or they were taught that in slavery to beat us, and we're talking about well over 400 years of a situation that transpired. Yet you mentioned our mamas. Isn't there a possibility that the father was beating the mother, which in turn now had the mother beat on the child, because now the child is a replication of that father that's beating on her? Is that really a slavery traumatic situation? Because let's understand, PTSD is post-traumatic stress diagnoses, I believe is what the word is. Disorder, my apologies. So it's actually, PTSD is a post-traumatic stress disorder. That's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So when we say that this is a post-traumatic stress disorder, not solely from slavery. So as I put this on with a spin on it, as he says, mamas And I'm going to play it again so you guys can actually hear what I'm talking about.
From birth. Our mamas beat us because of slavery.
Our mamas beat us because of slavery. That's what he said. And I'm going to repeat again. Our mamas beat us because of slavery. Yet there's another paradigm in there that he fails to understand, which is the father, or as he put it, our fathers beat our mothers, which then entail our mothers beat us because we resemble the father that's beating the mother. There's also that spin to the narrative or the conversation of PTSD. So yes, the mother, as he says, our mother beat us. The mother does have post-traumatic stress disorder because she was beaten by the husband, not because of slavery. So let's understand that. So when we talk about slavery being the root of his conversation or his statements, we're talking about over 400 years of a very traumatic situation that happens to many individuals, regardless of who they are, where they came from. Because there's a very famous movie that I did a dissertation on that's called Even the Rain, that talks about slavery and other things that many of us, whether it's Latino or people of the Caribbean, could relate to. And we too, if that's the case, we can say that we have PTSD as well, based on what we experienced with Christopher Columbus. So let's understand something. I'm just going off of what he's saying. So if I was actually sitting there talking to him, he and I would actually get into a heavy debate because I would be questioning what he's saying. So let's listen to a little bit more of what he says.
We was taught that in slavery. People walk out the church and go to the bathroom and put that one finger up to let master know they going to the bathroom. All that was taught from slavery, bro. Like, we still traumatized and don't know how to get any healing, or afraid of getting healing because we don't want to seem weak.
So with what he says there is also interesting. We are afraid to seek healing or to get the healing. Okay. Doesn't that also come back to a point of learning how to cope with the situation and or find a resolution to the situation where you do not commit the same errors to your children? Him being a male, he cannot beat his wife so that his wife does not turn around and beat his children because he's not beating on the wife. Now, if he beats on his wife and his wife beats on his children, that would be the PTSD to the children and the wife, but not him. So let's try to understand where he's going with this when you use the term slavery. And I'm guessing he's trying to say that it relates back to what happened many, many years ago with the slaves. Now, before I turn around and I show you guys something, I want you guys to listen to the end of what he says.
That's a sign of weakness. I ain't going to sit and pay no therapist my money. What fuck? But we actually need it. A lot of this.
So when he says, I'm not going to pay, or we're not going to pay a therapist when we actually, to speak to someone when we actually need that help. So we need the help, but you don't want to pay for the help. So let's understand what I'm thinking. What he's trying to say is that it's a sign of weakness to show that you're seeking help, or a sign of weakness that you have to find a way to resolve an issue that you don't personally know how to resolve it. So you got to seek it. Now, the first thing you should do is you should research it. Now, these time and ages, okay, you should be able to research it and figure out a way to go around it. If you need to pay someone, it is only right because you're taking up their time. They're not like the Joe Schmo that's going to give you the misinformation, or they're going to give you regurgitated information. They're going to give you actual information that fits and caters to you, the individual, and or to the family that needs it. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for someone to assist you in understanding what you're going through versus someone giving you the information that they're just reading out of Google or Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or YouTube, and they're giving you that information, which is incorrect. So when we talk about traumatic situations, the wife and I, as I mentioned before, the wife and I spoke about something, something that really came about in the conversation that may tweak everyone else's mind frame here. If you cannot agree, you have to explain to me why you cannot agree. If you cannot agree that there's a difference between paranoia and trauma, if you cannot tell me the difference between those two and how those two are different, then you do not understand what PTSD is. Okay? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to try to figure it out, and or if you need to Google it, whatever the case may be, or whatever how it is that you want to research it, I'm going to give you that chance. Is there a difference between paranoia and trauma? Those are the two questions, because those are the two situations that many people tend to get confused with to how they function in a person. Okay? Now, as we wait, I want you guys to take upon the movie that I did a dissertation on, dealing with trauma on specific people, on people in general, on what was going on during a specific time frame. So when we talk about slavery, as the young man mentioned, this is where I'm piggyback off his words, slavery. There's a movie that I did a dissertation on where my professor was quite impressed with my dissertation. So let's understand the first thing. This movie, all these people are actors. This guy here portrays the actor he's acting to be Christopher Columbus. So his role is Christopher Columbus, and everybody that's there, except for the employees that are wearing burgundy vests, are actors. Okay, so I'm gonna speed it up just a little bit because I want you guys to catch the most important part.
Yo, Cristóbal Colón, humilde siervo del rey Fernando de Aragón y la reina Isabel de Castilla. En nombre de Jesucristo, Hijo del único Dios verdadero, tomo posesión de estas tierras y mares y todo lo que contiene.
So right here, he's saying that he is Christopher Columbus, and he's coming from the Queen to discover new places in the name of Jesus, which is the true Son of God, and there's no other.
Y con este acto, proclamo la soberanía sobre estas tierras y mares.
Here he's saying the umbrella, of course, is replicating a flag because, of course, he's acting. So he's doing his role. He's reenacting his role because, of course, they're not in costume. So they're talking it out and doing the act because they want to make it feel lifelike. And this is where trauma comes into play, because I want you guys to look, even as you don't understand what's being said, I need you guys to look at the young lady that he comes and walks up to. Then I want you to tell me what is the difference between paranoia and trauma.
La más graciosa de sus majestades. Agradezcamos a la Madre de Dios habernos conducido con buena salud hasta este gran triunfo. Ave María, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amén. Este debe ser su poblado. Gracias a Dios, parecen pacíficos.
Now, here's a scene where he sees the natives. Now, again, he's looking at the hotel employees, and he's calling them natives, right? Natives of the Pacific, right? Now, this is where it gets real interesting, that I want you guys to tell me the difference between paranoia and trauma. Now, the guy he's talking to is portraying the role of his first lieutenant. He goes and he tells him that he wants him to go find out from the natives where they can find gold and treat the natives correctly because they need their food. And then he turns around and tells them, also find out what kind of weapons they have. So again, we're talking about paranoia and we're talking about trauma during slavery times. Let's understand this. This is where everything is coming from, because we heard the young man talk about slavery. His mama, slavery, beatings.
Confraternizad con ellos. El primero que encuentre oro recibirá una recompensa. Capitán, tratadlos bien. Necesitamos su comida. Ah. Y averiguad de qué armas dispone. Almirante, rápido, tiene que ver esto.
Now, this is where I want you guys and girls and everyone that is watching and watching the replay. This is your opportunity to tell me, is this employee that he's looking at, because the girl that he's looking at is an employee of the hotel. I want you guys to tell me, is she paranoid or does she have trauma of what she's about to experience?
Oro. 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 ¿Dónde está el oro? Oro. ¿Dónde está el oro? Ya sabes a qué me refiero, mujer. ¡Oro! ¿Dónde está? ¿Y a quién le importa una mierda el oro? Necesito un copazo, joder. Disculpe, señorita. Los actores somos así, unos puros egoístas. Gracias.
So now here you saw that he tells her that he apologized to her. It's just that they're actors and they need to get into their role of being actors. And he tells her he's sorry. Yet, as he's acting out the role, look at her face. We're not even going to talk about the guy's face because we could already tell what's happening with the guy. What is she going through? Is it paranoia that she's going through when she's looking and listening to this guy? Or is it trauma that she's looking at this guy and listening to this guy, even as he's not in a uniform, yet the way he's talking to her? So when you talk about, or as we heard the young man before talk about women, mothers, beating kids or beating them, and it derives or it came from slavery. And I also put on the picture as well how if a woman is beating her child, could there be a possibility that the husband is beating her or the man is beating her and she's beating the child out of resentment, out of anger, and so forth? Could that be it versus slavery? That's also another thing. We just watched a short clip of how an employee was listening to a man act out a role of Christopher Columbus, seeing a native on a land that they've never been to, talking to her the way he would literally talk to a woman, a native. And we saw her face. We saw the guy that was standing next to her, which is the other employee. We saw his actions. So now I come back and I ask you all, still have a moment to tell me the difference between paranoia and trauma.
Nos apropiaremos de vuestras...
¡El agua no alta! ¿Dónde chingados están mis indígenas? ¿Chingados están mis indígenas?
Now, I had to fast forward it because I want you guys to look at this one specific scene that, as the young man that we listened to earlier in the segment said, mothers beat or hit their children because that's what they were taught back in slavery. So this part here that I'm going to show you, I want you guys to really watch what's being said here, because this is where I'm going to ask you a simplified question.
Si cedemos un centímetro, estos indios nos llevarán de nuevo a la edad de piedra. ¿Puedes entender, por favor? Digo, que quede en algo, que tenga palabra el cabrón.
Joder, Daniel, es la única puta oportunidad que tienes de salir de esta mierda de sitio en el que vives, coño.
Muchísimas gracias, increíble, gracias.
So you guys saw violence, military, police, people look like Indians, people dressed up in Stone Age uniforms, chasing people in the woods and so forth, right? I'm gonna put this up again.
Gobernador de esta isla, quiero agradeceros que hayáis venido a vernos.
Kunan kamaches que gochamanta y os pagarás para que aikichis tuku de gankunata.
Tras mi primer viaje, hablé personalmente con sus majestades, quienes me instruyeron para que se os tratasen con respeto y cordialidad. Solicitamos que reconozcáis a la Iglesia y al Papa como legisladores del universo.
Mañaiku resina ichista, atuches kamachejunata que es el pamanta.
Y a la vez,
Now, mind you, everybody, this is where we talk about trauma, right? And the young man said, trauma, mother beats children due to trauma of slavery. So right now I'm showing you guys that there's these actors reenacting or creating a movie, because that's what it's all about. These actors are creating a movie of Christopher Columbus meeting people of an island or of other place other than where he's from, and how he treats them. You can see that this guy here that looks like an Indian, native Indian, that is a person who lives in that country. He's an extra. He's an actor as well from that country. And they chose him and they chose the other ones because they look just like the native people, which they are the native people. They're the first ones that were actually in that country. Okay. So of course they're going to look like Indians because that's who they derive from. That's their lineage. That's their bloodlines. So just watch a little bit more and I'm
aceptéis al rey y a la reina de España como legisladores de estas tierras.
Tantapis resina ikichis tiam, atuches kamachejunata que tuku es el pamanta.
A cambio, recibiréis nuestro amor y nuestra caridad.
Y chantapis haywanawai kutian alin causaita.
Simana Munanichu.
Y si no queremos,
Capitán, si no, os haremos esclavos.
I have to pause it because this is where it gets interesting. There's a reason why I paused it here, because as the young man said a moment ago, our mothers beat us because of slavery. That's what he said. Right now, you're looking at how an actor portraying Christopher Columbus is telling another actor that portrays an Indian of the land, if he does not comply with Christopher Columbus's demands rather, of finding gold, Christopher Columbus will enslave you. Right? So, if he uses the term, or rather not if, as he used the terms enslave, are we still talking about trauma now? Or are we talking about paranoia for anybody who lived after that main actor, character, family bloodline? Can they say it's paranoia, or can they say it's trauma, this reenactment of what happened many years ago? Let's continue.
Pondremos de vosotros a voluntad. Nos apropiaremos de vuestras posesiones y os causaremos tanto dolor como podamos.
mana chairi tuku kai hal patano hap
Now, we're talking about paranoia and we're talking about trauma. Even as this person is in acting form, he actually is from that land. He is a native of that land. Having another person from another country tell him that he's going to enslave him and he will do harm to him in any way he pleases just because he doesn't comply. So again, we have to try, appreciate you, Ron. We have to try to look at the face of the actors to see what's going on, to understand whether it's paranoia or trauma.
¿Qué queréis de nosotros?
Impuestos.
Holgeta Munanku.
Todo indio mayor de 14 años tendrá que llenar un cascabel.
Every Indian of the age 14 or older has to provide this belt filled with gold.
Tukuy no ganchis. Shun katawayo guatamanta pataman. Punta chinanchis tian.
Imawa, ¿qué ha dicho?
¿Con qué?
Now, here we go again. It's all about what you watch versus what you hear. This young man, which is a translator, is a slave to Christopher Columbus. But because he understands the language of the natives, he is forced to translate. Is he not a slave? So does his family, does his bloodline, do they have paranoia or do they have trauma? Just a little bit further.
Con oro. Toma.
Oriban junta chinanchista nin.
No es muy grande.
Mana hatuncho.
Capitán.
Oriban junta chinanchista.
Okay. So again, we have to try to understand something. This is why I was asking everybody if you know what the difference is between trauma and paranoia.
We got it,
One more time.
but never dealt with it, never put a name on it because we weren't privileged to. We weren't privileged to call our situation PTSD. We weren't privileged to learn all these different syndromes. But we done been through it from birth. Our mamas beat us because of slavery. We was taught that in slavery. People walk out the church and go to the bathroom and put that one finger up to let master know they going to the bathroom. All that was taught from slavery, bro. Like, we still traumatized and don't know how to get any healing.
So as he said, we still traumatized and we don't know how to get any healing. We still traumatized and we don't know how to get any healing. So my question to the young brother is this. If you don't know by now how to get healing for something that happened over 400 years ago, is it really trauma or is it paranoia? Because again, he's talking about him and the people now. Is it trauma or is it paranoia? Because in essence, that's where the thing is different. That's where the healing also takes place. Due to how 400 years later, many of us have learned how to cope, not get rid of, not to fix, cope. Because certain traumas in one's life can never, ever, ever be replaced and or forgotten and or taken away. It just doesn't happen that way. So we have to find a way to cope and heal. Because as there's many differences of what's being said or how it's being talked about is where it lays a lot of differences. Okay. So there's another thing that I want us to take a look at. Okay. So now, this here is what is actually in the psychological world of psychiatrists, counselors, whatever you want to call them, people who find a way to heal and or teach a person how to cope and then heal. So the essential feature of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is the development of characteristic systems following exposure to one or more traumatic events. Emotional reactions to the traumatic event are no longer a part of a criteria. The clinical presentation of PTSD varies. In some individuals, fear-based re-experiencing emotional and behavioral symptoms may predominate. In others, anhedonic or dysphoric mood states, a negative condition may be the most distressing. In some other individuals, arousal and reactive externalizing symptoms are prominent, while in others, dissociative symptoms predominate. Finally, some individuals exhibit combination of these symptom patterns. In layman's terms, for many of you who do not like to read, many of you do not like to understand what's being said, real simple. Trauma is something you experience, something that you physically go through, where you mentally, emotionally are unable to rationalize what has transpired. How it affects you is why it's considered a traumatic situation, because you don't know how to deal with it, because you physically went through it. Now I go back to what I was saying before, the difference between paranoia and trauma. Paranoia is the fear of something happening to you. So like the young man said, our mothers beat us because of slavery. No, our parents or our mothers beat our tails because they didn't want us to experience anything negative and because we were being disrespectful. That's why we got our tails whooped. Not because of slavery. It was because we had to put ourselves in check and prevent us from doing the wrong things. Okay? When you talk about beating and compare it to slavery, you're way off base. Way off base. Slavery, you had no choice. You didn't have the right to do anything. You didn't have the right to even debate or rebuttal or go against. That's why you were beaten. Now, as time has come across 400 plus years, people have the ability to debate and disagree with what's happening to a degree, because let's also not forget, many of us grew up with parents, mother and father. Sometimes it's the mother, sometimes it's the father. You were always told, as long as you live in my roof, you follow my rules. The moment you want to do what you want to do on your own, you get out. That's being told for a reason, because if you don't want to follow the rules, you need to get out. You weren't beat because you weren't following the rules, right? You were beat because you did not follow the rules. You were beat because you kept doing things the wrong way under the roof that you didn't want to abide by the rules. Slavery, you were beat just because of your skin color. Slavery, you were beat just because they didn't like you. Slavery, they would beat you just because they thought they had the right to do it. The same way you watched in that movie clip on how the young lady felt that trauma, not the paranoia, trauma from her bloodline of her people going through that with that man, Christopher Columbus. In the movie, they show Christopher Columbus taking women over to the water and telling the women to put their children in the water. Now, these are all actors in this movie, okay? The women are actors in the movie. And you see you hear the children, and you see the women crying and the children crying, and yet it's an act. It's a movie that they're filming, yet the trauma is still there about what they experienced. What their mothers actually experienced when the actual Christopher Columbus came and slaughtered the Indians just because they wanted to take over. Those people have trauma. We, to this day, if we have trauma because of slavery, you have to look at your bloodline. You have to find out what your bloodline is. You have to find out you have to do the research on why you have trauma. And of course, the difference between what you may think is trauma may actually be paranoia, and or you just want to be a knucklehead, period. Okay. So we have to understand what the criteria is behind post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, we have to really understand it, or they could just have been acting. If you watch the movie as a mother, I specifically reach out to mothers. Watch the movie. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, speed it up to that clip. If you can sit there and not have a tear run down your face as a mother, then you tell me if it's actually just something of acting, because you can actually feel the pain. And again, we're talking about trauma versus paranoia, something that has happened versus something that may happen. Okay. One more thing I want to share with you guys, and then I'm going to call it for the night. All right, where we at? Okay, so here we're going to see. Okay, I gotta make it a little bigger. How this plays a role in post-traumatic stress disorder, right? They have a checklist, right? For those that don't know, there is a checklist. So if you feel that you have PTSD, there's a checklist that you can go through. So as it says here, now again, this is according to the DSM, which is Diagnostic Systematic Medicine. This is a book about how to find what's wrong with you. So if you, the person that feels that you have PTSD, these are the questions you ask yourself. In the past month, how much were you bothered by repeating, disturbing, and unwanted memories of a stressful experience? And of course, it goes from 0 to 4. Repeated, disturbing dreams of stressful experiences. Suddenly feeling or acting as if the stressful experience were actually happening again. Key phrase, actually happening again. Reliving it. Feeling very upset when something reminded you of a stressful experience. And of course, it goes on and on and on. So let's understand that when you speak of trauma, it has to be something that you personally, physically went through. Now, I know there is something that's called lineage trauma. I've heard of it. That is something where it takes a little bit more understanding of what it's all about. Little nephew, always a pleasure. Thank you for the content. It has to come with researching. As top to bottom to say, DNA plays a role in it. So let's understand why DNA plays a role in it. Male and female come together, create a child. That child now grows up a specific way, has trauma because of beatings. Somehow, some way it's in the DNA because the father went through it or the mother went through it, and that's the way it keeps going down the line. That's what they mean by the DNA. Now, in order to know about that as DNA, you really have to do the research to know that your DNA goes way back to 400 plus years, and that's why you still have trauma from slavery days of your mama getting beat. Then you can say that you have trauma from slavery. Yet if you're not able to go through that, and you're just going off of my people, or we, or us, that's too generalized. Okay, because again, we've seen in many movies, and it's very, very true. There was people who were not technically slaves because they lived in the White House or they lived in the house, and or the vice versa. The ones that lived outside the house were the slaves. The ones inside the house were the privileged slaves. So we got to understand that there's a lot of factors involved. And the only reason why I'm talking about it is because it deals with mental health, and of course, mental health is a big thing. If many of us cannot come together to understand what are the triggers behind someone's dysfunction, of their health, then we have to ask each other and ask ourselves, do we really care about other people's health? Because like I always said to you guys, and I say it over and over again, my favorite movie was Patch Adams. And Patch Adams said, you cannot call me a doctor, or rather, am I a doctor because I put a cold compress on my neighbor's head because they had a fever? Are you calling me a doctor because I gave my neighbor a bowl of soup because they had a fever or they were sick, they had a cold? That doesn't dictate that I'm a doctor. So as Patch Adams says that, I say the same thing to everyone that watches the channel and those that actually come through. Understand something. If you say you care about someone and you really, truly care about that person and you ask them how they're doing, do you truly, truly, truly understand why you're asking them, are they okay? Are you asking it because you want to be facetious, or are you asking it because it's the kind thing to do? But in essence, you really don't even know how to resolve their issue. So are you being truthful to them or not? So that's where it gets into play, where we have to really, really, really understand when you generalize a word of us, we, our, mother. Try not to generalize, because when you generalize things, it makes things a little more uncomfortable for some. So the reason why I came on the Fatacha Show tonight is just to get some clarity behind the young man's view on how he said that mothers beat children because of slavery. That's what happened to them. But of course, we're talking about the difference between paranoia and trauma. Trauma, of course, is something not to play with. Some of us don't know how to get out of it. And the reason why I say some of us is because there's times that my trauma, I can relive it every single day. And of course, have I healed from it? Absolutely not. Am I coping with it? Absolutely. Just the way it is for me. Everyone's situation is different. Do I have a paranoia to my trauma? Absolutely not, because I know the difference between the both of them. Paranoia is something that I'm afraid of that might happen. Trauma is something that I'm afraid of that did happen, and I'm reliving it over and over and over again. That's where the difference is. So when we talk to someone and or when we talk to people and they say that they're traumatized by a situation, we have to really ask them, are they traumatized or are they paranoid? And then after you know the difference of the two, how to associate the two or one of the other to that person, and then the both of you work through it together. And that comes back down to, again, if you truly care about the person, you don't have to get paid for it. Okay? There are professionals out there that do get paid for it. It's because you have to pay that person for their time, because they're not going to give you the runaround. They're not going to give you regurgitated information. They're going to work or talk to you about your situation, not what they believe this fixes everyone else. Okay? So let's understand something. Today's segment on the Fatacha Show, even though many may not tune in, it's fine. I understand it, because they prefer to see other things. But, of course, I have to do what I have to do because it's my channel. So big old shout out to Cop Car for winning the very first candle of the sweepstakes that I put out there. Okay, for signing up the top to bottom, for becoming a subscriber to the Fatacha Show. They got the first candle before anyone else does for the new collection line that's coming out. Congratulations to them. Big old shout out to Little Nephew Out the Pit podcast for allowing me to use his content. Big old shout out to Queen of Queens, top to bottom, of course, for being my support, being my backbone. And of course, a big old shout out to all the other, to Ron from Ron's Opinion Don't Matter, because Ron, we love you. And of course, little niece Queen Sackcloth, Big old shout out to her as well. And of course, to all other subscribers and followers, like, follow, subscribe, and share the content. Because again, at the end of the day, do not ever say no one told you, because here on the Fantastic Show, I'm going to tell you. So don't ever say no one never told you. So if someone turns around and says, oh, nobody told me, you can send them my content and tell them, watch his content, because he's going to tell you. All right? So with that being said, as I always say, do not say bye to your loved ones. Always say see you later. So to all my loved ones, I will see you later.